Who's your Howie? Have they not been fired coworker, and what have they done to earn that title? Worked for a company that tested soil samples for mining companies. Each test had to be given 0.02 of a gram of a white substance. Can't remember what it was called. So the company wins a massive contract, and there's a lot of work to be done. Too much for the lab, so they start falling behind. The manager accountant tells everyone that to speed things up, you are to put 0.02 within 0.05 of a gram instead. Do you know how long it takes to measure out 0.02 of a gram? But the results all come back wrong, and the mining company wastes $300 mining for copper that wasn't there, and successfully sue us. 300 people lost their job, which was 50% of the company's workforce. Manager who made the bad call didn't lose his job, as he denied he told everyone to make the gram change, even though there were about 30 witnesses who said he told them directly. I started work at this company about 2 years after this event. I have never heard so much abuse and vitriol about a person as this manager. Nobody in the company had any respect for him and treated him with absolute disdain. There were signs on the doors of some labs telling him he was banned from entering. People used to tell him to F off in the corridor as they walked past him. I tried to stay neutral, but when I heard what happened, story 2, I work in a hospital. She frequently touches patients with unclean gloves. She unleashed a fart so bad in a patient's room that the patient actually asked her to leave and not return to their room. Aside from that instance, she has been fired from numerous patients' rooms for a variety of reasons. She doesn't manage her time well at all and fails to get her assigned patient baths done. Most recently, she was caught touching a patient with a known communicable disease without gloves, and she was interacting with an unclean specimen collection pan from the same patient, again, without gloves. I felt bad for her at first because it felt like everyone mercilessly bullied her, but she sort of deserves it at this point. Story 3. I worked in corporate America, Fortune 500. I have too many stories to tell, but one stands out to me. Corporate headquarters in an $80 million building has a master electrician who has been there 40 years and knows where all the bodies are buried. I installed a bunch of UPS dual backup offline battery systems and server closets, 40, at about $5K a pop. The units required a 30-amp breaker and receptacle with correct gauge wiring. The master electrician changes my spec without saying a word, calls out for 20-amp breakers since that's what was already there and available, and after my install is complete, he goes back in, whacks the 30, a cable ends off the UPS, and installs a 20 a Hubble. Now the UPS won't provide maximum runtime under load, and he has voided the warranty on 200K worth of UPS systems. The asshat spends a month arguing with higher-ups that his opinion supersedes physics, and I finally get the manufacturer to send a "you bought it, you name it" letter. I eventually have to yank all 40 units, replace the correct cable end, and get a sign-off from the manufacturer. They will still honor their 5-year warranty. Problem solved. 3 months later, on the same site, a $400,000 end loader goes missing, vanished. It pops up at the master electrician's farm parked in the back 40, and he explains that he took it home to do some maintenance. Despite having no heavy machinery experience and staying silent while everyone was frantically looking for the end loader. No one fires the guy. 2 months later, he gets arrested for his 3rd DUI, and the C-suite crowd intervenes with the courts and cops, and he gets probation. Kept his job another year and then retired with full benefits and a huge pension. Story 4, my boss at Walgreens. When she took the position from the prior shift, she promptly canceled the overnight shift, which was a problem, because that was when we got things like cleaning and restocking done. She then shoveled those responsibilities onto the evening shift, but didn't increase their staffing numbers. Instead, she fired people on that shift for having the audacity to use vacation time. So even though the store had a 3-employee minimum, we often had 2, occasionally dipping down to 1 if, for any reason, the other person couldn't make it in, like being sick. Even if both people were in, it wasn't a small store, and they were expected to clean and restock it while dealing with the large amount of customers that only petered off around 9-10-ish. Since the store closed at 11, that only left about 1 hour when, well, everything had to get done, and there were still customers, just not as many. She then routinely ignored vacation time requests, even if they had been filed months in advance, threatened people with firing if they didn't come in while sick, and harassed any employee who wasn't working with 100% uptime. So if you say, took a moment to sit down because you had been on your feet for 8 hours, or if you weren't facing the store despite seeing a customer blatantly coming up to check out, she'd get furious. It was next to impossible to avoid write-ups, her chewing you out, ignoring requests, and everything, at least if you weren't on her shift. Oddly, not only was her shift properly staffed always, but every employee on it got a favorable review complimenting their hard work, even if they were entirely inept. My boss's boss worked at another Walgreens nearby, and I got sent over to help with the Halloween rush. He was utterly baffled how the lazy and inept employee had completely restocked the entire store and cleaned it and everything 2 hours before the shift was scheduled to be done, leaving no work to be done. Even when I explained to him what was going on, he didn't believe me. When I finally moved away and had to quit, she asked how much time I needed off and said she could give me 2 weeks at most. I laughed and told her I was giving her a 2 weeks notice. My sole regret is that now, 4 years later, I had to move again, and the only large employer in the area is a different Walgreens, and I'm too scared to apply because they'll probably have me on file saying I did a bunch of horrible stuff. Story 5. I work in the cash industry with someone who refuses to lock their cash drawers. When I pointed out to her that she's on camera and can get fired from stepping away from her cash drawers without locking them, she said, "Well then, I'll just pretend." Lady, they can see on camera that the drawer is obviously unlocked. She also keeps offering to search the building with her gun that she is absolutely not allowed to have on premises every time there is a security issue because she wants to shoot someone. Needless to say, we tell her no. She once credited the wrong account because the account number on the payment didn't match any account numbers we had. The person had transposed some digits. Instead of looking up the customer or contacting any of her coworkers, she just punched in random numbers until something popped up and credited that random account. She then blamed the people whose accounts she credited, people who had nothing to do with the payment that was made, and were honest enough to tell us that they had been mistakenly credited for giving her the wrong account number. She once asked me if an email was domestic or international, and if it was international, what she would have to do to send an international email. She genuinely surprised that no one else agreed with her mentalities. Constant loud personal phone calls about private things that no one needs to hear, especially as we are not allowed to have our phones out while working due to security and privacy issues. Drinks exclusively, energy drinks, and cannot figure out why she has some severe stomach issues. Keeps going to her car to grab something every 15-20 minutes as if we can't see through the large glass window to the parking lot that she's a chain smoker and the reason why our nice flower garden is full of cigarette butts. We'll talk to people as if they are in the middle of a conversation with her, even though they have just arrived, or are walking by, and we'll continue that conversation for 5 to 10 minutes after the person has left. Story 6. I work for a hospital. A few years ago, I transferred out of scheduling and into a different area of the hospital, radiology. Before I left, they gave me a new hire to train to be my replacement. My specific job in scheduling was transcribing paper orders from doctors' offices who were outside of our specific hospital system into our EMR software, into the patient's chart, and then call them to set up their appointments for any outpatient testing, imaging, cardiology, etc. This job required more medical knowledge than some of the other scheduling jobs, since they were working from orders were all already entered correctly into the patient's chart directly by the ordering doctor. Often the way the outside doctors would order things didn't 100% match the way exam names were worded in our computer system, so I'd have to do some interpreting based on understanding the nature of the tests and medical terminology know-how. They gave me this specific new hire because they thought she had medical experience. She had been an office manager for a doctor's office, I was told. It turns out she hadn't worked in a doctor's office at all, but in a dental office. Big difference. Teeth are like the one thing hospitals don't work on. She had no knowledge of human anatomy outside of the mouth. She could barely name organ, let alone know where they were or what all they did. Aside from that, she was just generally dumb. She said she'd been let go from her managerial position because the dental office did a lot of downsizing during COVID. I imagine she was just equally incompetent there, and they used COVID as an excuse to get rid of her. After only a couple of days, I went to the scheduling boss and asked for someone else to train, saying that this new lady just could not do the job. That's when my boss said, "But she has medical experience," and I had to break it to the boss that it was only in a dentist's office, prompting a big facepalm from the boss. But they didn't have anyone else to put into the job, so we were stuck with her. Still, I had a couple more weeks to train the new lady, so I did my very best. I provided her with lists and resources. I wrote out medical abbreviations for her. I explained to her over and over again that when a doctor orders an RUCO ultrasound, that means right upper quadrant of the abdomen, and that in our specific software, we had to enter it as a limited ultrasound of the abdomen and just specify in the free text area that it was an RU key. Still, every time she came across one, and there would be multiple per day, she would stop and ask me what it meant. She had shoved all the notes and resources I've given her into a binder and never looked at them. She'd just ask me instead. But it was about to mostly not be my problem anymore. So I did my best and then went on to my new job. Of course, in my new job in radiology, many of our patients ended up being scheduled by her, so I still had to deal with her duck-ups. She'd schedule the wrong test, give the patient the wrong instructions, etc., and she never seemed to get in trouble for it. When we'd catch her mistakes, We'd call her and she'd apologize profusely and say she didn't know and would never make that mistake again. But I knew she knew better because I had taught her those specific things. Fast forward 3 years and she still hasn't learned. She's still ducking up patient orders and appointments. Most recently, she scheduled a patient for a regular CT scan when the ordering doctor actually wanted the kind of CT scan where we inject contrast directly into the patient's spinal canal rather than just in an IV. She realized at nearly the last minute and tried to cover up her mistake by changing the appointment to the correct test about an hour before the patient was to arrive, and she didn't call to tell anyone. Luckily, our department saw the test pop up on the schedule, and we all went, "What the heck?" Because those procedures have to be planned in advance. When we're going to be jamming huge needles into people's spines, we like to have a bit of notice so we can make sure we have a doctor, interventional radiologist, that can do it, and a nurse available, and there's special prep for the patient as well. They have to be off blood thinners, and they have to bring a driver. We called her, and her excuse was that she didn't know it wasn't like a regular CAT scan. It has the word intrathecal in the test name. And yeah, a layman might not know what that word means, but if you're going to be involved in planning patient care, you should probably not be a complete layman, and at least try to learn the language. Story 7. When I worked in the nursing home laundry room, my coworker literally refused to do the job she was hired for. She actually told the supervisor she wasn't going to do it. Not just that, but she didn't do anything else either. She spent more time on the smoker's porch than in the laundry room. She drove her friends home while she was on the clock. She refused to pick up the soiled laundry more than once or twice per shift, even though she was supposed to pick it up 4 or 5 times. People would tell me that they didn't see her for hours at a time, and quite often questioned whether she was actually there or not. She once called the supervisor and told her that she wasn't coming into work that day because she was too drunk. She was also working in the nursing home kitchen and would leave the laundry room to go work in the kitchen because they paid her more to work in the kitchen, even after she was told multiple times to change into clean scrubs before going in the kitchen. She would still wear the scrubs she had on while working in the laundry room, then go into the kitchen to prepare food. This woman got the same evaluation score that I got, and the same raise that I got, even though I was doing 99% of the work. Story 8. Some old git in his 60s, caught screaming at coworkers multiple times, has been banned from entering 3 of the buildings we're supposed to work in, one of them 3 times over, screamed at and threatened to harm a female worker because she reminded him of his mother when all she did was silently walk by. He even admitted to everything he said in the police report, physically grabbed a female coworker and shoved her out of a room with a witness, overhearing everything over the phone, constantly accuses everything of being woke, always goes on long-winded rants and conspiracy theories about how women only exist to have kids, regardless of other workers or the general public being around to hear him, and simply doesn't do the job he's paid to do, at all. But it's okay, guys, he has bipolar disorder, so there's nothing wrong with it. When I first got into federal government work, they told me I'd never be fired for anything short of murder. Like everyone else, I rolled my eyes, thinking it was just an exaggeration. I'm now telling you all a federal employee will never be fired for anything short of murder. Story 9. He was a former felon for substances dealing and robbery. Pretty sure he was a substances user. This is factory work with large presses. He spent most of his time screwing around and claiming he was fixing his machine, or the parts weren't coming out right. Changeovers from one part to another should only take between 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on the depth. He'd regularly take 4 or more houses. Despite his output being significantly less than the rest of us, no action was ever taken to correct it. He'd gotten into numerous arguments with other employees, including calling one employee the ducker. Employee handbook states, motivated attacks are supposed to be immediate termination. One day, he followed me into the bathroom and started yelling at me. I didn't hear him at first, as I still had my earplugs in. I'm at the urinal taking a piss, and I hear someone talking. Turned to see him and realize he's talking to me. Took my earplugs out to hear him. At first, I thought he was commenting on some stupid meeting we all just had. Then I realized he's screaming at me, calling me a ducking got, and saying, "You think you better than me." I'm confused as hell and just said, "Dude, WTF? Get the duck out, I'm pissing, man." He kept screaming at me, saying I'm disrespecting him and asking if I want to go, as in fight him. I just yelled back, "Duck off, get the duck away from me." I managed to finish pissing and zip up. He's maybe 5 feet behind me, still yelling. I'm a skinny guy with no real muscle, and he's kind of a more muscular guy, so I'm ducking scared at this point he's going to get physical. Thankfully, he doesn't and just walks out after multiple times of telling him to get away. This bathroom has 2 entrances, so I go out the one he didn't. I started going back to my station only to find him standing there waiting for me. I see him and just start yelling, "Get the duck away from me." Our shift lead walks up at this point, and this guy walks away. I told the shift lead what just happened. He immediately takes me to find a supervisor and report it. Supervisor takes my statement, says he's going to talk to the guy and to go back to work for now. The supervisor comes to me later and says he talked to the guy and it's a he said this, he said that situation, and that we just need to stay away from each other from now on. No write-up, no disciplinary action, nothing. Just a slap on the wrist. Like WTF. Time goes on, I avoid the guy. He's since gotten into more situations with other employees. For some reason, they decided to train him to operate the forklift. Rule is while in training, you have to have a certified operator walk next to you anytime you're on the forklift. He starts hoping on it every chance he gets by himself to practice. Came back from break one day to see him with a fully loaded container, about 2,000 pounds, lifted about 20 feet in the air, doing circles in front of a press for no reason. For the next hour and a half, he's on the lift randomly moving things around, taking things on and off racks. Nearly dropped a 1,000 kilo die, trying to put it back on a rack. No one did a thing about him. He eventually got certified and would spend more time on the lift than at his station producing parts. A few months go by and I get forklift certified as well, and I get a promotion to backup shift lead. Anytime I'd be put in charge of the department, he'd go out of his way to disobey me. I'd tell him get back to his station, and he'd roll his eyes at me or make some mocking remark. I'd repeatedly reported his behavior to our supervisor and even his manager. For some reason, they couldn't get permission to fire him. It took over a year of people complaining about him before the company finally stepped up and walked him out one night. Found out later on that the guy got sent back to prison for more crimes. To this day, we still tell stories about this guy and how bad he was. Story 10. Two guys, same company, well-known conglomerate in the industry. Department is the behind the scenes that makes a lot of the other businesses work. Guy 1, older, 60s at least, been in the business a long time. Sole job is to negotiate, sign, and file contracts with suppliers. That's his whole job. Constantly lies about the agreed prices and terms. Constantly lies that he got his contracts signed. Files no contracts at all, so there's no way to tell when he is lying and when he actually has his contracts signed until it's time to access what we are contractually supposed to have. Has always operated that way and continues to operate that way. Has been with company for 10 years. I come in and have to work with a large chunk of his contracts and raise holy hell. For years, people would wait until it was disastrous and just say contract was not correct. We had to come up with something on the fly and fix it while pissing off the end customer and going over budget. Not me. Day one I start working with him, I demand the paperwork. In emails, in conversations, in meetings, at company events. And then I stop covering. Customers show up, no product. I forward to my boss with 50 plus emails, many, on which she and her boss's boss is copied, asking for contracts, and my last email 30 days ago saying that since he can neither confirm nor deny he did his job, I am just assuming it's done. This happens 4 to 5 times in a row, and the complaints get flagged to leadership in the conglomerate. It comes to our incompetent CEO. First 3 times, CEO manages to soothe feathers. 4th time goes viral on social media. I am brought in a meeting to find out WTF happened to this customer. I present a printout of all the emails and responses, the CCing I did, even the separate email I sent to the CEO that I was really worried about the customer. Document is collected. Guy is gone by end of the week, no announcement, just gone. No one had the balls to just refuse to clean his mess and document the hell out of it. He was an A-plum, whole so good riddance. Guy 2, nearly identical issue, but this time, Guy is the nicest guy in the world. Has a cute family, super knowledgeable, happy to share that knowledge. Been with the company 20 years since he was a teenager. Super disorganized, cannot keep up with when he has to make special exception contracts, which is 20% of the time. I beg him to please solve this issue. I talk to him, send emails, even give him suggestions on where he can source exception product. Weeks go by, and I know that in this one specific case, we are facing a $1 mistake that he hasn't told anyone about or solved. This is happening just after Guy 1 is fired. Finally, I email my boss. Nothing. I email his boss. Nothing. I send it to the incompetent CEO. We both get called into a meeting. Super nice guy admits it's a mistake, and he hasn't fixed it. I say, it's okay, I have researched options, we are not totally fault yet, and present the work I did to try and cover his ass. I end up having to solve the problem, and it still ends up costing $300K to solve. Over the 7 years I'm with the company, this happens with Guy 2 at least 10 more times, but not quite at the same cost level. I work hard to get him to identify the issue and then solve it. Years later, they promote him to a new position where he just does research and is not in charge of project deliverables or contracts. Eventually, can't keep up with that job and becomes a stay-at-home dad to his cute kids because his wife is killing it as some high-powered lawyer, and they can afford it now. I got work at this company right after the actual worst company I ever worked for, so I was constantly dismissing their dysfunctionality because it was such a huge improvement from my last job. In hindsight, having multiple key people who just didn't do their jobs because, at the end of the day, The doers were too introverted to not cover for them is just one of the many, many red flags at this place. Story 11. I have two, and they are married to each other. The woman. We work in a salaried office environment and have union employees on the shop floor. You don't have to wear a suit, but dress pants and a nice pool are the standard. She dresses like she's going to work in a garden or drop the kids off at school in the 90s. She rarely shows up on time. Start at 7, shows up after 8, and usually leaves early, end at 5, gone before 4. She easily smokes a pack a day. Her favorite thing to do is start a project to placate whoever needs something, then never finish it. If you call her out, her go-to is to cry and play victim. If the crying doesn't work, this 35-plus-year-old goes into teenage snootiness mode. She once spent 6 months planning and organizing her wedding and doing Euro work, which caused some major issues. Cue the tears, everyone is out to get me, etc. How did she get in the office from the shop floor? After repeatedly applying for salary jobs, she threatened to get a lawyer because the reason she didn't get hired was definitely because she was a woman and not because she was a piece of crap. Did I mention she was the union chairman and stabbed several people in the back to help secure the salary job? Whenever she was put under someone that would make her work, she would cry to someone and be put under one of the many people she fooled instead. I remember one of them I warned about her, and one day he got to see the real her. The look of shock on his face was hilarious. The next week, he started giving her work, and she was moved to someone else. She made it to a senior position by lobbying a previous plant manager that was a woman. During a time our company was going through a "look, we hire women at upper management levels" phase. The plan was to make her a manager if she did X, Y, and Z. Surprise, surprise, she didn't do any of it. Our most recent plant manager thought she was amazing, despite me repeatedly pointing out how she wasn't doing anything with solid facts and data. He made her a manager, and the whole plant started going downhill. The man, he's a supervisor. He smokes a pack in the first 6 hours of his 8-hour day. He is the shop substances dealer, specializing in pills, which he is high on most of the time. He never knows what's going on, and despite 3 years using the same system, has no idea how to use it. If you ask him a question, he'll generalize and sound like he answered, but not actually say anything. When he supervises on the weekend, everything gets messed up. But when anyone else does, everything is fine. When our Git plant manager made his wife his boss, they changed his title to superintendent to avoid the obvious conflict of interest. Somehow, he used her position to do even less. When his wife was working with the female plant manager to get a manager job, it was discovered that he was doing substances, a PS1 driver disk. He was sent for substances testing, and his wife cried her eyes out, thinking she would have to go too. The plant manager put a stop to that because she didn't want to look bad promoting a cokehead. He was gone 2 weeks, then came back with a chip on his shoulder and a fantastic story about how he pissed clean. Fun fact, whenever someone gets hurt, a substances test is mandatory. It never takes more than 24 hours. You see where this is going. His wife quit, which was one of the greatest things to ever happen, but that left her job empty. So he was put into an office and he is a full-time superintendent. There are lots of great jokes about how he superintended to do it, or about how he is the stupid intendant. He does even less now. I'm convinced the plant manager was either having 3 ways with the 2 of them, which is possible because they used to look for third parties on Adult Friend Finder, or they have some kind of dirt on him. Story 12. A previous job was the CEO's brother, so he had a get out of jail forever card. Few of the highlights. Would put himself into projects he was not a part of and penalize the team by shorting deadlines just cause. 2 examples of this that destroyed the company. Project 1, which I was a part of. The project was to make a self-service kiosk for license plate renewals. Original deadline was from September till August. So the project manager assigned the needed development people, got the hardware people on board. Work began, progress was going smoothly, and the stand-up meetings showed great progress. Hardware passed testing. Everything was compatible. The back end was coming around great. The front end needed a little work. The manufactured prototype was slated to be completed, being built on March 15th, so we would have an actualized system to test on. March 15th comes, the prototype isn't quite ready. It would be on the 17th. Not a big deal since the deadline is in August. The stand-up meeting on the 18th, the CFO is there. All right, why in the hell is the prototype just now getting unloaded? This goes live on April 15th. Literally everyone, including the project manager, turned at once and said, "What in the hell are you talking about? April. The contract states August." CFO, "Well, I just changed it." So a month of scrambling ensues. The front end is kind of a hot mess. The back end has some catastrophic issues that could cause the whole system to collapse. The April the 10th stand-up, this is expressed. The CFO said, "Not my problem. Oh, and we need to change several key components as we are wanting the ability to use dumb card swipes. So now the hardware has to be changed, and the software has to change to accommodate dumb card readers." The pile of crap that was there at April 18th was 10,000% the CAFO's fault. Like 3 front-end devs quit at that point and 5 back-end devs quit. A stable version of that system was around August, but the CFO shipped out in April because he gets stuff done, He shipped a box full of dog crap. Project 2, this project was to be a full rewrite of the main software project deadline. It was 2.5 years out. The CFO pulled the same crap, cramming it down to 9 months. That project lost the entirety of the back-end team 4 times. And by that I mean there was no one on the team. They had to hire all new people who had to figure it out because no one was there. That project eventually was scrapped entirely, $7 million, pretty much set on fire for no goddamned reason. Company got bought out. The new company's first order of business was to fire the CFO, story 13. My mom quit a high-paying job of 15 years over one. My mom was an RN managing a nursing home, and one of the nurses was constantly taking time off for various illnesses and emergencies, often with zero notice, that she could never provide proof for. You had bronchitis? Okay, glad you're better now, but I'm going to need a doctor's certificate. I didn't go to the doctor, but I was really sick, I swear. Your ex slashed your tires, and you couldn't drive into work, and for some reason couldn't take a cab, bus, or call us. Did you take photos of the damage for your insurance? Could I see them? I was so traumatized by the whole thing, I didn't think of it before I had the car towed. It was always something, and it was 2 or 3 times per week. Or even one if it was a drama that she took several days or a week off for. Like the trauma of a family member pet suddenly dying. And she seemed to have an endless supply of random relatives and furry friends that were constantly meeting the most tragic and inexplicable demises. This woman was so unreliable that my mom begged her boss multiple times to do literally anything about her. Give her fewer shifts, send her to one of the company's other nursing homes, fire her, whatever. Because on the rare occasion she actually showed up to work, she was so inept at her job that it just created more work for everyone. The boss kept her around because they went to the same church and he felt bad for her. After about a year of my mom working her ass off to make up for this woman's incompetence, she says she needs a whole buttload of sick leave because she's been diagnosed with cancer, though she can't specify what kind when asked. She leaves for a few months. My mom is finally able to see shifts, hear rosters go smoothly, productivity go up, everyone's happy. Then the crazy woman comes back. Not to work though. She rocks up in the middle of a random workday with a shaved head and black funeral clothes and starts saying that since she'll be dead soon, she wants to make things right before she's gone. Apparently, she wants to see my mom fired for discriminating against her for being gay. Firstly, no one had any idea this woman was a lesbian. Everything we'd ever heard about her relationships against our will suggested that she was straight and that she had crappy taste in men. Secondly, she picked the wrong person in the wrong workplace to try and accuse of discrimination. Half my mom's co-workers/friends are LGBTIQQ. Her daughter is bi. My mom's boss takes the side of the crazy woman he goes to church with and tells mom that he'll be suspending her without pay while they investigate the claim. No, you won't, says my mom, because I quit. You can deal with her now. In the following months, the crazy lady was forced to return to work because she couldn't provide enough evidence to workers' comp that her cancer was real, tried to play it off as, the doctors made a mistake and gave me unnecessary chemo, I'm suing, and generally made everyone's lives hell again. 4 other nurses quit because of crazy lady, 2 followed my mom to her new job. And my mom's former boss retired early. Story 14. I've had many physical jobs, and it's always the obese guys that sit on the toilet or sit and eat for more than half their shift. Then the other half, they're talking about sports or staring at their phone. Story 15. I'm a bank teller, and I trained this girl about 3 years ago. She went through all the training modules 3 times and still did not understand our teller system. Our system is so painfully bare bones, it literally has a button for deposit, or loan payment, or cash check withdrawal, etc. For the record, I've never had an issue with anyone else I've trained. There are some growing pains, obviously, but nothing ever like this. Constant policy violations like straight up leaving cash around, having massive amounts of cash in her drawer, depositing into wrong accounts, even took money out of the wrong account, giving incorrect amounts of cash, even though we literally have a machine that dispenses cash for us. She's a mess. So anyway, she got a promotion recently to a banker position. That's wild on its own, but she also got supervisor capabilities. And when you have those, you can override yourself. So like if there's a difference or a transaction needs to be reversed, etc., you can override it and override those who don't have supervisor numbers. She's already overrided herself 3 times. Once was to void a transaction after she had already given the customer a receipt. She said the date was stale dated BC. They put 23 instead of 24. So she voided it and called the customer, business customer, to say you need to come get this whole deposit, 13 checks plus cash, instead of just letting the check go through or just depositing it without that particular check. The customer comes in days later. Customer and my other coworker are adding up these numbers. The customer is getting 1,000 and my coworker is getting 915. They deposit the checks and move on. The customer called an hour later and said, we're getting a discrepancy BC, there was cash in the original deposit. Well, dip crap, didn't take the cash out of her drawer originally. So she was over $64 on the day of the original transaction. And then the next time she had her drawer out, she was over by $21, equals $85, which she should have been off the day of the transaction, not 64. None of us knew any of this because she can override herself. She either A, can't count, or B, broke up the difference in 2 different days. Either of those are good options. She's also been leaving cash around again. Fun stuff. Story 16. It's been a few years, but I worked at a warehouse, and this 19-year-old kid taught how important it is to be liked, more than working hard. He, our lead, and our supervisor would leave early in the shift and get wasted and would come back just to clock out. Only reason they didn't do that every day is because he would miss 2-3 days of work every single week. I was the hard worker who basically picked up the slack even for our supervisor. I voiced my complaints, but they never cared. They'd get so wasted sometimes our supervisor would call us, and we'd drive out to them to drive them back to their places. Eventually, the kid took a position in another area for like 50 cents more and got fired after a week. The supervisor that got drunk with him got promoted, and then the lead that would join them got his supervisor position, even though I was more qualified. Learned my lesson and left story 17, lazy. Lydia, we make no money doing a crafty job. Everyone shares the crafty tasks to be fair, as we are a team, and again get paid no money. I called her on her bullcrap and suggested she do her share, in trouble for bullying. Tell my supervisor that she isn't pulling her weight, and ask supervisor to correct supervisor in trouble for bullying her. Tell the HR people, please get her to pull her weight. They give her a new special liaison supervisor number 2, so precious Snowflake doesn't have to deal with supervisor number 1. Meanwhile, both myself and supervisor number 1 are winning awards and meeting performance merits left, right, and center, being given huge projects to execute on a stupid tight timeline, and we do it flawlessly. She doesn't have to work as a team. She isn't on light duty for medical or similar. She has been there 15 years at this point. Remember me saying we make no money? Well, she makes slightly more as her tenure is long. She is known amongst the whole store as lazy Lydia, yet not one person can make her act like she gives one single solitary crap about her job. But they refuse to fire her, and they are concerned she will sue for after dismissal. This is Canada. We have laws. They have insurance. Let the lawyers duke it out forever. Lazy also does the following: makes fun of those who may speak English as a second, third, or fourth language. She spends 30 minutes at a time in a washroom stall on her phone. You can hear the texting and sending swoop sounds. She can't park her car in the designated area like everyone else. She parks in a customer area, crookedly outside the lines, but management doesn't notice as they don't see her doing it. She does personal grooming when on the floor and in work time. Lipstick, hairbrush, a small battery-operated fan held in her face while she stands still. Meanwhile, the rest of us carry things like snips, knives, tuck tape, zip ties, maybe some Tums or Advil. Lazy, hairbrush, lipstick, fan. Again, we make crap money by doing a crap job that we all share. Do your share. It's easy. Also, yes, we work differently. There's no way I can lift as much as ABC as he has forklifts for arms. Also, XYZ has had 3 heart attacks, so he works 100% for him as OBS. I'm half his age, so it's apples to oranges. But not lazy. She hunches and leans on her station for so long the first time I saw it, I was concerned she was having a health episode. Nope, lazy is lazy. Past coworkers complained about her laziness and have since moved on as 0 changed. Currently, coworkers have complained and 0 changed, so they have disengaged and withdrawn. Toxic apple spoiling the whole barrel. In conclusion, absolutely mind-blowing how little a person values themselves, that they simply have no internal drive to be a better version of themselves. Sad. Story 18. She's currently on leave sulking after she got written up from me reporting her. She's wildly incompetent. I've taken over part of her job while she's been gone, and the issues I've found are astounding. She's also extremely unpleasant. She works from home 3 days a week because she's so unpleasant to everyone. Our boss doesn't want her in the office. Story 19. Worked with an engineer at a large telecom charter. I have 20+ years of programming skills in mostly database tech. I get hired on to work with this guy, who is an old school like me but has 10 years of systemic knowledge in the company, which is huge. So my first few weeks were fine, but we started to butt heads. All of my ideas were crap. All of his were the way we were to do it. Fine. I redesign a huge data warehouse for their financial systems. He takes the design, implements it was a months-long process, and surprise, it works. Though we need to square peg round hole a lot of the components. It was my design from the get-go. He took the credit for it, but I really didn't care all that much. Fast forward a bit. Our mutual boss takes me to lunch and tells me he is bad-mouthing me constantly to anyone that will listen. To my face, he is fine. if abrasive at times, and then usually only when I push back on ideas. Well, funny thing is that this lead engineer was also bad-mouthing the boss to anyone that would listen. Basically, this dude was toxic. Everyone was crap to everyone else, and he did nothing but bad-mouth everyone to everyone, but never to anyone's face. Problem was that this dude was around for a long time and knew all the systems, so they couldn't get rid of him. Boss, who was with the company for 17 years, was laid off, the toxic engineer celebrated. He actually told the boss to duck off in a meeting once, in front of everyone. A year later, I was laid off during Charter's annual layoff purges. I know it was mostly because of him bad-mouthing me and everyone else around him. He's still there and complaining about everyone and making everything toxic. Don't get me wrong, he's a smart guy, and he knows a lot of what goes on in the systems within that company. But he is so short with everyone and crappy to everyone. At some point, he will get fired, but will find something else. But he is taking so many people down with him and driving so many people away. It's just crazy how toxic he is. Story 20. I used to work at Nordstrom as a jewelry sales rep. I used to help out at the handbags and accessories area also. They had a salesperson in the accessories depth that would open up at least 5 Nordstrom cards a day. Nordstrom cards were not easy to persuade someone to get on a daily basis. A good salesperson was lucky to even get 3 a week. During one of our "How is the company doing" meetings, that salesperson was #1 in the company and getting the most cards open. Everyone at the meeting was in shock on how many this salesperson was able to get. One day I worked alongside that salesperson, and the manager asked him to show me how he gets so many Nordstrom cards open. I hesitantly agreed. Later that day, a customer wanted to buy a pair of sunglasses from me. At the end of the purchase, the salesperson comes over to help me persuade this customer to open a Nordstrom card. The salesperson says, "Oh, let me see if I can help you get %15 off your purchase today. All I need is your ID or driver's license." The customer looks at me, and I look at the customer like, "You the heck?" The customer gives him his driver's license, and the salesperson guides him through all the questions on the keypad. I could tell that the customer was very uncomfortable about this. At the end, the salesperson says, "Okay, congratulations, you saved $15," and hands him all the documents for his purchase. Not once did this salesperson tell the customer that he was opening a credit card. I was disbelieved by this. This had to be illegal. After the customer left, I confronted the salesperson and said, "Did you just open a credit line without telling the customer?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's not big deal. I do it all the time." I was shook that this guy was doing something illegal all this time. I went to my manager and told him what this salesperson was doing, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I requested that the purchase be removed from my commission and given to the salesperson. The manager at the time shrugged it off and ignored it. I couldn't believe they were letting this salesperson get away with it. After that evening, I made the decision to quit the next day. I couldn't work for Nordstrom anymore because of the negligence and this salesperson manipulating people. Story 21, night shift worker, has repeatedly had complaints filed against him for aggressive behavior and verbal abuse. A lot of people refuse to be put on the same shift as him. Calls out a ton at the last minute, leaving us scrambling to fill his shift. When he does show up, often we'll literally just not do work and leave it sitting for 12 plus hours for the morning shift. We'll also go out of his way to make a huge mess, literally smearing things on tools just to force people to clean up in the morning. Also like sending really passive-aggressive, hypocritical emails and leaving nasty notes for people. And yet, somehow, he still works here. Sometimes I ask people what they'll write in the card that gets passed around if he ever leaves with being fired. And the general consensus is that nobody will bother because they know we won't write anything on the card. Story 22. I had one that was a low-level manager that was constantly flirting with women that were his subordinates, outright asking a bunch out on dates, so there wasn't really a layer of plausible deniability. It was a hugely known thing, and it was a lot of women that he did this with. He'd get woken, trained up on certain positions because he was into them and was generally just a big creep, I think, really. Why he got away with it was because it was such a known thing that tons of them had this idea that he'd obviously already been reported, but nothing happened. But everyone I talked to had that impression, and it kind of seems no one ever reported him, assuming others had, a kind of harassment bystander effect. Noteworthy is that a few others in management were fired for similar behavior that was reported to R, so I don't think the company was condoning the behavior. I think it was just this guy was so open about the behavior and did it with so many women that his behavior just never made its way to HR's ears because everyone just assumed it already had. He may have eventually gotten fired, but he got away with it for at least the 2 years I worked with him. Story 23. One calls in 3 days a week and is just an overall Karen to everyone. She makes things more difficult than it should be. She goes to our supervisor anytime someone breathes the wrong way. Somehow she got bonuses just for doing her job. Yet when I covered for her, that was the first time someone's room had been cleaned in months. One used to get treated with kid gloves by the former bosses that the one time she was written up for something, she took the day off afterwards. She has some emotional problems that no one wants to set off. Me personally, I don't give a duck because I'll just roll my eyes. She doesn't do any extra detailed work. Story 24. So, I knew a guy who caught 2 Article 15s, the Army's version of a super-duper write-up, back-to-back for fighting. One was a dude in his platoon, the other his PSG. He genuinely didn't give a crap and was surprised when finally, a year after his pattern of misconduct, they finally kicked his ass out. I was only there the last few months of his time in service, but his attitude before learning he was being kicked out and after were virtually the same. Story 25. Worked for a large subsidiary, which was a consistent moneymaker for its parent company. Parent company decided their stock was too low and so mandated that our subsidiary lay off 100+ people. The boss of our CEO flew in to personally make the cuts, along with his head of HR. The goal was mostly to cut older, higher earners, rather than focus on cutting dead wood. Felt particularly bad for one guy in his mid-50s who was a stellar worker who had a kid in college. They also fired the guy sitting next to him, who was a pretty recent hire, who was an absolute git, and also wasted everyone's time in chit-chat. I think he was on the list because this was a brand new position. This git broke down crying in front of the corporate bigwigs and said how long it had taken him to get the job and he didn't know what he would do. The corporate bigwig fell for it and the git kept his job. The cuts were already a morale killer, but keeping the git just added salt to the wound. Story 26. Worked retail in a toy store for 5 years, and we had a guy who was possibly the most incompetent employee I've ever seen. But the weirdest thing is that none of it was malicious or deliberate. He was just incapable of learning from any of his mistakes. A customer would ask him something about a product like the price or the age range, and he'd just make something up rather than find out the answer. I don't know if it was to appear confident to the customer or that he thought asking for help was a sign of weakness or what. More than once, myself or another employee passing nearby would have to jump in to give the correct answer. If we took him off the shop floor and put him in the back stocking shelves, he'd put every product in the wrong place and mix products together, making them impossible to find later on. He'd turn up late because he forgot he was working, or turn up without his uniform because he forgot to put it in his bag, or just turn up on the wrong day completely. When he eventually quit, quit, not fired. He did so 2 days before Christmas, our busiest period, and told us 5 minutes before his shift was starting. He thought the only thing he needed to do was give us his uniform back, which was actually the only thing he didn't need to do. But the worst thing he did was found by me when I cashed up at the end of the day. One of the tills was 250 pounds down, and I worked out that it was a card payment. Sometimes someone would enter the wrong amount, like 23.50 instead of 32.50s, and we'd just have to contact the card company to get the payment corrected. But I couldn't find a matching payment for one product. It turned out this idiot had just given someone a $250 product completely free. He'd put it through the till and never taken any payment from the customer at all. There was no rejected payment or declined card or anything. He'd simply forgotten to charge the customer any money. After that, I assumed he was going to be fired, but instead, the manager said he just wasn't allowed on the till anymore. Never understood why he was kept on when so many more competent people would coming in asking for work every week. Story 27. He would constantly speak Vietnamese to people, then would scream at them for not listening to him, despite knowing we couldn't understand him. Was also idiot. He only got fired for calling the regional manager a ducker. Story 28. Frank. No one knew how Frank kept his job. Frank and I were both in tech support. Fairly low level, but at least it was internal tech support rather than customers. Frank took either Monday or Friday off every single week. He'd call in sick. Sometimes he'd take both. We didn't have anywhere near that much PTO or sick days, but he never got in trouble for it. Not clear if they were all paid days off or if they just gave him unpaid PTO after a while, but we assumed paid since nothing was ever mentioned, and he never stopped calling in sick. You'd think it was nepotism or cronyism keeping him employed, but we never saw any evidence of that. And honestly, he'd probably have a cushier job if that was the case. Baffling. Story 29. I worked in a coffee shop for 6 years. I did about 75% of a major expansion that took over the space next door and tripled the size. Owner sold it, and I helped train the new owners. Then a week after they took over, COVID hit, and within a few days I did another remodel, and just the 3 of us worked for 9 months, 7 days a week. Business doubled, hired new people, did another remodel, and I ran front of house, trained and handled the coffee side. Then the owner hired 2 daughters of a cook without talking to me, and then hired a few other really bad hires. I was kept out of the hiring process, and slowly she took over managing the front. The 2 daughters were high all the time. Stumbling in to start their shift, I wanted them to spend an hour trying to count the till. Takes 5 minutes for one person. And they would all hang out in the kitchen. I would watch people come up to try and ordering and, well, no one was around. We would have hours of no sales because they were all high in the kitchen. I kept bringing up all these issues, trying to get the owner to understand these people need to be fired. I finally just gave up and just showed up to do my job, but I just couldn't deal with these crafty employees' bullcrap any longer and would just yell at them when they were not doing their job. And then I got fired. I still love the owners and wish them the best. I went back about a year after I was fired to visit, and sales revenue were down at least 40%. They were super excited because overall sales were up 10% higher than when I left. But minimum wage has increased 15% and product costs have raised 30% and then did raise prices about 10%, which accounted for the higher sales. But overall profits are way down. I just told them that's awesome, sales are up, but knew that really they're making maybe one half what they were making. Story 30. I've worked with a lot of incredible women in my time in tech, but my two examples that came to mind are both senior women in tech, because these big companies are literally desperate for technical track female leadership. One of them kept ladder jumping by straight up lying about the projects being better than on track. She'd have engineers only develop the path we'd take in the demo, but claim the whole thing was done. She'd get incredible ratings in her annual review based on these lies. And then she would apply for a better job in a different organization. She would jump onto the new ladder just in time for her former project to be found out. But it was too late. She was gone and promoted. She did this 3 times in about 5 years before getting caught. And she was working right under a major VP of a 120K person tech company. They reprimanded her by demoting her down to a regular manager role again. Anybody else should have been fired, but she was helping to those women leadership stats, so they kept her. She then sued for discrimination on the basis of sex, alleging that she was demoted for being an ambitious woman. Absolute a hole who needs intense humbling. The other one was a very nice lady, but she was supposed to be a technical leader, and she was constantly pinging me, a lower experienced team member, for very basic help. This is totally normal for onboarding of experts, but it lasted like 2 years. And I remember one thing that she actually got done in that time period. She has now jumped to a new role in which she is a software architect at my former employer. Godspeed to that one. She cares and wants to do things right, and I will tolerate that TBH. Her role might actually be a net benefit if she's helping women feel more comfortable in tech. I just know that there are better choices to promote because I'm constantly getting my ass whooped by those better choices. Story 31. Mid-level manager. Regarded as an a-hole even by corporate America standards. No one liked working with him, including our on-site US government customer. One day he goes too far and pisses off the wrong people, so his site access and all privileges were revoked, effective immediately. Should have got him kicked out the door. Nope. Our company bought a smaller one in the same general line of work, installed him as CEO and paid to have him moved and set up in a new place, 300 miles away. Or the guy that had a job there because of his dad, whom we all assume knew a ton of dirt on people, and gave Junior the files. He's had multiple affairs with women that he supervised. When the affair was discovered, they were fired while he kept his job. Junior's beyond inept, but he kisses a lot of ass and facilitates the synergy or some crap like that, so he's in with the C-suite, even though he couldn't run a lemonade stand. Nobody wants to work with him or be around him any more than they have to. Story 32. I worked with a guy at the British railway company Network Rail who no one could stand. He was massively overconfident in his abilities and incredibly arrogant with it. We'd be having meetings and he would fall asleep, but then deny it afterwards, even though everyone witnessed it. He'd also make incredibly strange suggestions in meetings that had very little to do with the subject matter at hand, and then insult the rest of us when we told him the idea wouldn't work. Another thing he would do is go in and edit group reports without letting anyone know, thus ruining the report, and then arguing with senior managers that the report was brilliant. I had a bizarre discussion with him where he arrogantly told me that his geography degree meant he knew more about computers than I did, and I'm someone with a computing science degree. When you tried to tell him he was wrong, he would do this gesture where he would tilt his head back with a silent laugh and wave you away with the back of his hand. And it wasn't just in work that he was like that. He seen himself as a bit of a catch and took the view that women should be honored that he would agree to date them. A lot of people working with him at his level wondered why he got away with this, because managers above us found him very difficult to work with as well. For example, regarding the group report situation, it became normal for managers to ask everyone involved to check that the reports hadn't been modified without our knowledge, because they knew that's the sort of thing he would do. Well, it turns out that his dad was a quite senior employee of the company. He was a regional director, so one level below the board, and someone who had significant influence. Story 33. This ducking Karen will not stay at her ducking workstation. Doesn't matter if she's cashier or counter, she will wander off at the most random of times, and especially if a manager is around. I'm here trying to fill pickup orders, and she thinks that because I'm nearby, I can take care of customers for her while she does God knows what. No, excuse you, I have my job to do. And then she has the audacity to act annoyed that she keeps getting called back to her station. Literally, one time she left the brand new cashier, still technically in training, all by herself to go next door. Not on her break or anything. She just clocked in, got to the registers, and decided to just pop over next door to buy cough drops and a drink. Plus, after 3, almost 4 months, she still has no idea where anything is or how to answer basic customer questions. She's tried to call me to the front over the most basic functions of her job, asking if I can help with a problem and not telling me what the problem is. Just, can you come up here? And then it's something that just a little common sense could fix every ducking time. Not to mention her absolute lack of efficiency and urgency. She will spend forever confirming customer information and asking them questions and getting into deep conversations with customers, even when the line is 10 deep. She just takes her sweet-ass time with everything, forcing everyone else to jump on registers to deal with the line, while she chatters away asking about what college someone's kid is going to and what major they're looking at. Zero consideration for anyone else's time. If you're reading this, you know who you ducking are, and we're all praying you get fired soon. Story 34. I'm sure I'll get heat for this, but every unionized place I've ever worked has had dozens of these. I'll give my favorite 3 examples. 1. An older guy with a horrible attitude. Our department's job was to go out to various sites each day and do computer replacement, repair, etc. He'd come in every day on time, then refuse all his assignments and sit in the same chair all day until it was time to go home. Some kind of union contract loophole or something. Every day we went through the same canned routine. The boss would give everyone their assignments, which sites they were going to, who they'd be going with, etc. Every day the boss would give his assignments, and every day he'd refuse and just sit there. I was only there for 4 more months, but he did the same thing every day I was there. 2, there was a small department of people, 4 people, who had become redundant in some way or another. They didn't have a supervisor anymore, and they didn't have any responsibilities. They somehow never got let go and just kept coming to work and not doing anything. 3, when I worked at a dairy plant factory running the machines that put milk into cartons, etc., taking returns, dumping out expired milk, etc., there were several people who built a fort in what we called dry storage. This was the giant area where non-refrigerated ingredients were stored. They built a fort up in the shelves, and they'd just go there and play cards and sleep for their entire shifts. For some of them, they'd do this 3-4 times a week for years. Bosses had been trying to get rid of them for ages, but the union had been fighting for them, and they weren't able to get rid of them. Story 35. Working for one of the largest chicken producers in the Middle East. In chicken farms, we have strict biosecurity protocols because the birds are so fragile and close to each other that infections can spread rapidly. We use separate trucking fleets for each of the 16 farms. This is important. During peak season, the logistics were slow, demand was high, and buyers were complaining. So the division head waived the biosecurity protocols and allowed any truck into any farm as per speed and convenience, without proper decontamination at entry and exit. Bird flu hit the farms. By the time it was detected, 14-day incubation period, instead of being contained in one farm, it hit all 16 farms, since they used a common fleet, and killed 100% of our chickens. Around 2 million birds dead. The business. A, lost 20 million capex in 2 weeks. B, entire gene pool of selective breeding over a decade was gone. C, suppliers moved to competitors, and we still haven't won them back after 4 years. D, market share plummeted to 0. E, insurance found the business was at fault and didn't pay out the business. Head was transferred to corporate and makes the same pay for much less work. How? I'll never know. Story 36. I used to work at a help desk where we assigned calls to engineers in various parts of the country. One of my coworkers was possibly the most fire-able person I've ever worked with. She was loud, crass, obnoxious, defiant, and her attitude, like her body odor, absolutely stank. She would drop pointless and toxic insults about her coworkers into calls with our field engineers out of the blue. She would only assign jobs to one particular kind of site. Other kinds of site had their own databases and programs we needed to use, and she would say that she accidentally lost her passwords to those other systems a long time ago, meaning the rest of us had to cover that work for her. Every now and then, the center would have to update a register that tracked how much of a particular kind of material we used. It was a tedious process, so she basically thought of it as someone else's job, bless her, even though it was clearly everyone's responsibility. One day I walked into the center to start my shift, and she was in a full-on argument with the supervisor on duty, literally shouting at him across the entire help desk. He repeatedly told her to go home. He repeatedly told her to log out and go home, and she refused, just flat out ignored him and continued her tirade. I've been fired from jobs before despite trying to do everything right, despite putting my best foot forward. This woman spent her life picking and choosing what she would and wouldn't do, and treated us all like crap. And she just danced between the raindrops. Duck you, Shelley, and duck you everyone who refused to discipline her or fire her for her bullcrap. Story 37, 911 operator. One of those jobs where there is very little margin of error, and people who call are very distressed. Worked with a guy who took the job far too lightly. I used to hate sitting near him because I knew he'd duck up and I didn't want to be in his path. He would eat apples on the phone, which was very loud and obnoxious to anybody listening and very disrespectful. We were told never to tell somebody to calm down, but to be careful with your language when it came to caller control. Like instead of calm down, you might say, I understand you're very upset right now, but I need to ask you a few important questions so I can get you some help, okay? He'd just loudly go, ma'am, calm down, okay? He listened to calls he wasn't supposed to, and it got him in trouble when a person calling who was experiencing paranoia thought people were bugging his phone. And this guy happened to be listening in on mute, and when he clicked off, it made a loud noise, causing the paranoid caller to have a meltdown. However, the biggest sin of all, and one he got spoken to about, was that when you went on your break, you had to log off your phone, otherwise calls will come through to an empty desk. Guess who didn't do that? And a serious call came through to nobody. I left after a short while, knowing the job wasn't for me. He was still there. I hope he improved or got fired. Story 38. I am said coworker, and I think my days are numbered. I feel terrible, but my heart is not in my job anymore, and it's so high pressure that it consumes so much energy to fake it. The alternative is losing everything because I find myself without any sort of backup plan and feel disconnected from the world now. Mental health struggles plus the isolation of moving to a new city and struggling to make friends. My life revolves around a job I can't stand and has no fulfilling meaning otherwise. My coworkers are much better at faking passion for what we do, and they're better at juggling work-life balance. Most are older with families or 40s plus. I'm single and alone. The younger new team members aren't escort and have a strategy that for next steps after this stepping stone. It's an everyday battle to not lose to myself, just to get through the bare minimum of my job. Burnt out. Story 39. Sleeping within half an hour of arrival, mid-morning nap until lunch, afternoon napping, sleeping through closing time, and left sitting to wake up hours after everyone leaves. People drive by and report the car's still in the parking lot 2-3 hours after closing. False documentation that things were done that weren't because of sleeping. Missing documentation of things that were done but forgot about because of sleeping. Promises to customers with no delivery because they fall asleep after the conversation. Story 40. I've not even been at my company for a full year yet, and one of my supervisors has received over a dozen complaints in that time. We just lost one of our lead staff, and they said in their resignation that it was due to this supervisor creating a hostile work environment. She was responsible for firing our only Black employee, who was there on government contract, from a federal agency who was providing us with this employee out of the kindness of their own hearts, because he very professionally told 2 of our employees that their seniority in our company didn't supersede his master's in the field he was teaching in, and that they needed to stop attempting to change the federally written and mandated curriculum he brought with him. They had to hire an additional supervisor to her position because several members of our staff refused to work with her. Zero idea of what a professional tone is, zero idea of how to properly delegate tasks, and zero ability to take responsibility for her own gigantic mistakes. The one time we ever received an email apologizing for a duck-up, we printed it out and tacked it to a wall in a closet she never goes in. How TF she has not been fired yet is beyond me, but she does not belong in a management position whatsoever. Story 41. Every single one of his direct co-workers has complained about this guy, as have several in higher position who have to work with him and even his boss. He's apparently being talked to whenever anyone asks, but this has gone on for over a year without much change. 1. The kind of worker that ruins the trust of remote working for the rest of us. Has spent whole afternoons on idle, last seen X hours ago, and not replying to messages or getting work done. 2. Constantly late, including when responsible for meeting external people or setting up things for groups in the office. He lives within a 10-minute drive of the office. 3. Has been known to disappear for up to 2 hours for their 30-minute lunch. 4. Constantly messes up simple stuff that they've done tons of times before. Knows exactly how to do it when tested. Seems just to be laziness or not paying attention. 5. The majority of screw-ups that get brought up are traced back to him, usually around things not being done or only half done. 6. On his turn on the group inbox, saves everything that generates a task to the end of day, sends a brief reply to everyone who emailed in asking for more information, even if it's already stated in the email, then leaves the actual work in the email for the person covering the inbox the next day when they reply back. Story 42. So I will say, they eventually fired dude, but it took months. Dude would sleep in the shop, feet propped up, arms folded over chest, chin down to chest, straight sleeping. Multiple pictures were taken. He stole from the pantry, from housekeeping, probably from the maintenance shop. He took the shuttle for joyrides and would put upwards of 40 miles on it a night, went into the pool shed and slept, adjusted his time to get more hours by never actually clocking in and instead using time adjustment forms, saying he was there 2 hours before he ever showed up, walked around on his phone constantly, stood at the TV in the lobby watching football. I was so glad when they finally fired him. Story 43, my last employer. One stole breast milk repeatedly, promised to stop, got caught red-handed, so I had to buy a mini fridge with a lock for a mom that needed to pump during the day. The thief was never fired. He left on his own. Another had an affair with a subordinate, then fired her. Actually, several executives did that. An EVP would scream at employees and include personal information. He's still an EVP. Prior employer. Dude sent an assistant to his house to pick up some things while he was traveling. We found out later that he knew a homeless person was squatting in the house. He never told the assistant. The squatter confronted her, but she was able to escape. Coworker had the audacity to admit he hoped the assistant would have scared off the squatter so he wouldn't have to deal with him. Guy creeped out female candidates so much that we received several complaints. He was excluded from interviewing women. Women would have screaming tantrums in meetings, not always about the topic of the meeting. Sometimes it was an argument she had with a family member, or she didn't get correct change when she bought her morning coffee, not necessarily even that morning. Story 44. Girl who worked for the bar I worked in, got wasted every shift, used to scream, literally scream, at customers because they wouldn't leave after last call. Once ripped her top off in the restaurant when she was wasted. Once randomly started smashing glasses and laughing hysterically on the restaurant floor with customers in the building. Used to date a bartender. Ended up cheating on him with a customer. And utter chaos ensued. I'm sure there's stuff in forgetting. Didn't get fired because the owners thought she was hot. Eventually got fired for taking 3 customers to the office and getting into the backup liquor supply. Story 45. Worked at a Wendy's in high school, and we had this guy named Brian who was just an awful human being and employee. Here's a short list of the things he did when I worked there. Caught several times doing substances and leaving his needles in the bathroom. Brought a gun into the building and was twirling it around in the back to play with. Caught scratching his balls, and then handling food without gloves. Never cleaned the grease traps during his shifts, which needed to be done 3 times a day, which ruined one of our grills when he worked 4 days in a row. Several harassment warnings against underage employees, he was in his 30s, would use his keys after hours to let him and his buddies in so they could do substances together, all on camera. This was all them years or so ago, and I went through there not too long ago, and he was still working. I asked the manager who was also working there when I was, and she said he's still up to the same stuff, but they don't want to fire him because it's hard to get people who are willing to work morning. Story 46. Taking days off whenever, sometimes with less than a few minutes' notice, often rather obviously to avoid tedious events. Leaving the office to take care of personal business, unannounced and unauthorized, on the regular. Reasonably sure that was beer that spilled out of their Starbucks cup. Constantly disputing upper management's decisions, vowing non-compliance and threatening to walk. Meeting with customers and former customers in personal time and complaining about internal company issues. Let me just say that I deeply respect this person. I cannot believe they do not get fired, and I wish I had half the spine they do. I have been through the ringer for far less, more than once, and they just keep getting away with it. This is a Japanese company, by the way. These behaviors are fundamentally incompatible with being employed in Japan. Although certain regulations make outright firing people hard for the company, what I've experienced firsthand is that troublesome employees are given soul-destroying posting until such a time as they learn to comply or quit of their own accord. This person has managed to maintain their current station for over a year and has no intention of going anywhere. They are waging a one-person war on 3 levels of management and winning in a country where oppression of labor is a basic tenet of the culture. Story 47. Ask the new hires questions about her own job and how to do it. Would clock out for lunch and come back an hour later with food. Would then clock back in and eat at her desk. Would refuse to do her job while she was still eating. Would online shop on her work computer and would not do any of the work she was supposed to do in the downtime. Called out sick constantly. It was a pattern. If the person next to her was out for whatever reason, she would be out the next day. Every time. The boss did not trust her to handle the front desk by herself. She had been at the front desk job for years, was so behind on her own assigned time-sensitive work that it piled up. The boss then reassigned it to me in my downtime. It took 3 whole days to catch up, just going that work for 7.5 hours each day. The boss fired the new hire for not enough attention to detail instead of the coworker everyone in the office had to babysit. I left that department a year and a half ago. That coworker's still there, pulling the same crap. Former boss did not know how to manage conflict, which was an issue, and only made the situation worse. Story 48. The finance team did a lot of work to perfect how the financials flowed. A controller was brought on, and he hired a CPA. After the first of the year, I like to review all of my reports for relevance and accuracy. While doing so, I noticed that the chart of account had changed in such a way that the flow of data was completely broken. I sent an email asking for an explanation. Turns out the controller and CPA had been working on this change for 3 months and never told or consulted anyone. The damage was going to be bad, but since January wasn't closed, there was still time. The finance director cut his vacation short and came to the office to unwind the changes. Ultimately, things were okay, but there was a permanent mark on the chart of accounts with $0. But it now required special handling. With a complete lack of communication for such a major issue, I expected at least one firing. Nothing came of it. Both of those guys pulled other shenanigans with still no repercussion. I had to just avoid them to keep my sanity. They were both a complete drag on the company. Story 49. I work in a fast food restaurant. One of our night shift employees is an 18-year-old guy who has crap himself at least twice and refused to go home after. Just walked around in his crap-filled pants. He's pleasured himself in the bathroom before. He can't count money. I had to show him how to make 52C. He can't make drinks while looking at a screen that shows exactly what drinks he needs. He will flat out say no half the time when asked to do something. He ruined 20 sizes of flour by not closing the container while cleaning the floors with the water hose. Then, we have a 21-year-old who comes in drunk or high or disappears for half an hour to smoke by the dumpster in full view of drive-through customers. He will also say no when asked to do things. He's gotten into arguments with every manager over being disrespected because he was asked to take the trash out or clean the bathroom. Story 50. A friend of mine works with a How the Duck coworker. This woman wanted to get a specific surgery covered for her knee or hip, forget which. Insurance denied it as not medically necessary, as another surgery would be perfectly fine for it. She wanted the fancier surgery for who the hell knows what reason. She also knew she was about to get fired from this job. It was her second job at a supermarket, so she dropped a deli lid in the camera's blind spot at the deli counter and slipped on it. She brought in an ambulance chaser who got her a settlement plus the surgery paid for, and that job will not let her go now. She brags at her main job about how she has to do nothing. At her main job, nobody will fire her despite showing up 15-30 minutes late every day. Because every time discipline is even mentioned, she starts to do things that are dangerous, things she requested accommodations for, and say she will slip because she just has to do it. So the talk of discipline is dropped because they don't want a PR nightmare or a lawsuit. Story 51. She comes from a wealthy family. Her family has a business related to the industry this company I worked for is in. She is suspiciously appointed as a director for customer experience, in charge of plus 300 people. She is arrogant, stubborn, lacks people skills, treats everyone like inferiors. In a company that is quite notable for taking care of their employees, she made the most stupid decision. Nobody understood her decision. Her team told her she dismissed all feedback, total contempt for everyone. Clients hate her. Her team hates her. Her peers despise her. All the numbers go down. Not one single KPI is in green. Clients punish the company on the surveys. Absolutely no result to show yet. There she is, 2 years later, crafting on every single employee and client, losing company's money and reputation. But hey, she's cooler than all of us. Just because she drives a Tesla and I don't. Story 52. I worked in a call center on a tech desk. I prided myself in doing my job the best I could. Consequently, I was frequently in the top 3 techs for closed and resolved cases almost every month. One of the guys that had been on that desk forever was super lazy, rarely took calls, and spent the first half of each day browsing the web, Reddit, adult cartoons, manga, whatever. One day, my manager came over and told me that guy was going to be my new lead. The next morning, old lazy ass dropped a bunch of his stanky, moldy tickets in my queue because he didn't have time to work them. I went directly to my manager and told him I wasn't going to work that crap either, and they would grow even older in my queue. They vanished within the hour. Fast forward, I was hired to work direct for the company we were supporting, and a year or two later, so did lazy ass. Somehow he schmoozed his ass up the management chain while I have little upward mobility. Fortunately, I like my job and work with good people. Still, I wonder who he has to blow to keep his job. Story 53. I work in the trades, union at that, so the crafty people really do seem to hang on. This guy is known across the local areas being shockingly lazy. He legit doesn't do duck all 90% of the day. Easy. He doesn't give a duck about the job or anything really, and while I can admire that to an extent, it makes him a pretty lousy employee. He could be worse, I guess. Probably because he just couldn't give enough ducks to bother. I worked with him once, and I just wanted something to do that took more than 10 minutes, and he told me he didn't know what there was to do. He was in charge and suggested I find somewhere to hide and kill time. They recently had to tell him to stop hiding in the office and/or truck all day, and that he has to actually be present and available for his underling. Surprisingly, he's doing well recently, but also how is he still employed? I'm pretty sure a waffle iron could do his job most days. Story 54. I worked at Walgreens 16 years before I quit and went to another pharmacy. A nightmare towards the end, due to a terrible DM and bad management. I was a fantastic employee, knowledgeable and reliable. I missed 6 days in 16 years. We had a newish tech that had been there less than a year. She was terrible, lazy, and still couldn't type a prescription after being there almost a year. She called out constantly, at least once a week, not counting the 2 weeks she missed for a medical procedure. She missed between 65 and 75 days in less than a year. She was rewarded with mostly early shifts, and I was rewarded with mostly late shifts. Part of the reason why I quit, I had a "please stay, we'll give you a raise" exit interview. Too little too late. I brought up her behavior. Rules are you should get written up, warned, terminated after 10 days in a year. She should have gotten fired at least 5 times. She later quit on her own about a month after I left. Story 55. Had an idiot, who was a crap worker to begin with, ask our lone female coworker if she had any spare clothes he could have to dress up his doll. Now, he had previously had half the crew ask upper management to fire him over his lack of working, among other things. But even after the girl told management about the doll incident, they still didn't fire him. She ended up calling up the company chain when the store did nothing, and that eventually got him fired. His mom was a middle manager. That's the only thing we could think that kept him employed. Story 56. Agent named Jasmine. Yes, man. Jasmine has been directly told by his manager to stay off Facebook. All of our internet activity with the company laptops and cells is tracked. The manager drove by his home. They live relatively close to one another, and saw the company truck in his driveway, checked the truck's GPS, and saw it had been there for hours, while Jasmine was allegedly working overtime. Jasmine drove back to his home office to have lunch. A 45-plus minute drive instead of just having lunch at a closer office or just in his work truck. Had his hour lunch, then drove back to his work site. Another 45-plus minutes. Was found charging time on work projects he had zero reason to. Has been removed from various work projects because of general incompetence. Told my manager he didn't know how to do basic job. Has had several of his coworkers refuse to ever work with him. Has been caught several times just sitting at his desk, usually ducking around on Facebook or YouTube. And I don't mean went on for 5 minutes, I mean 3+ hours. Somehow, he hasn't been fired. Story 57. Nothing. She does nothing, including her job. And not only was she not fired, she was promoted. And then the tasks of the job she was promoted to were delegated to 5 other staff across 2 departments. Story 58. Story 59. Well, most recently, he got chewed out by the department manager in HR for yelling at a customer and smelling like booze. He was explicitly told he could not help with any front counter customers. The only reason he hasn't been fired yet is because of health issues. Story 60. They didn't get fired, but they do no longer work there. Literally did no work and used company resources for personal use. Management refused to hold them accountable or give them deadlines for deliverables. Plenty of people can fly under the radar with low productivity, but what sets this one employee apart is that they infested our office with bedbugs. We started finding a bedbug here or there crawling across a desk in the cubicles near their cubicle. Then we were finding them regularly in their cubicle and even crawling on them. It was several years of hell until HR took our complaints seriously. Luckily, most of us who worked in the vicinity did fieldwork and just avoided being in the office as much as possible. I fully believe anyone who says that bedbugs cause PTSD. Story 61. I worked at a dog daycare boarding facility and they lost a dog by negligence. They allowed a dog with congestive heart failure on a few meds. He wasn't eating particularly well, so you had to put the pills down his throat. 2 separate people, including a manager, just threw his meds in his bowl, and he didn't get his meds for 2 full days. That particular manager had told me a few times to just throw pills out if I find them left in the bowl when we had multiple medication-reliant dogs. The business owners are aware of this, and it was continuously brought up to them by various staff members. That particular had to go to the vet and be in an oxygen tent for days, where he subsequently passed, which the business owners hid from us too. I don't think they wanted to accept responsibility or fire the crafty manager, because no one sticks with that trash-paying job. Story 62. He did get fired, but not as quickly as he should have been. When I was a lead server at my last restaurant job, basically a server with management capabilities, one night my fellow lead server allowed his girlfriend in after closing, got into an argument with her, and proceeded to corner her while screaming and gesturing aggressively at her. The only other employees in the building were 2 tiny women who seriously feared for their safety in the moment due to his aggression. I saw the security footage and no longer wanted to be alone with him. It took all of the women on the management team coming together to convince the owners he couldn't work there anymore. Story 63. I work for a streaming company. He flat out lied about doing work. He said he did the product requirements, talked to stakeholders, and fully vetted the solution. We know he didn't because the solution he put forth physically isn't possible. Like, no matter what, it can't be built because the client team can't read that programming language, and it was 4 months delay, and we still don't know what to do because he left on medical leave and didn't leave notes. This tool was supposed to be used by C-suite, but when I went to HR, they said it was a performance issue and not fireable, even though he faked documents and communication. We now think we found another program where he faked everything, and the solution he has been having us plan for is also not possible. It does give me comfort that it's basically impossible to get fired here. Story 64. I work with a guy who's incapable of following the very specific coding requirements we're given. Our PMs will give a list of numbered requirements for specific enhancements, new requirements, and bug fixes. If we follow the requirements step by step, we'll meet what they're asking for. This guy will just start coding and not follow the requirement. Then his code fails every peer review. And I do mean every single peer review. If we're lucky, he'll get it right with the second round of peer reviews. Our boss apparently asked him to do something for him 7 or 8 years ago, and he got it done quickly, so the boss thinks he's some kind of coding genius. He's literally the worst coworker I've ever had. If the boss wasn't protecting him at every turn, the PMS would have had him fired years ago. Story 65. Years ago, but this coworker was an idiot. Apparently regularly came to work high. Not fireable, but chewed with her mouth open constantly. She was able to talk herself out of a firing into a 2-day suspension. The best thing was, I told my boss not to hire her, and he didn't listen to me. He regretted that hiring within a month. The cherry on top is that instead of firing her, they fired me. I had been struggling with depression for months, but was doing my work, and I was let go because of an attitude problem. Story 66. Not a coworker, but an employee. Own a construction company. Dude's got all the ambition and hustle of a stone tree sloth, has to be retrained on things constantly, because who he's worked for before did not give 2 craps about quality, and he's just used to doing it that way for so long. Can't speak more than 2 words of English, and again, no ambition to even try and learn the English for tools. So just having him grab me an electric cord turns into a 5-minute ordeal of him bringing me back 10 different things. He's still here, and mainly because he's always here. Been late once in 8 months. He also knows enough to get things done, just need to clean it up a bit. Motivation? Well, see, but even as much as I get frustrated with it, I'll put up with it, because the one thing you can't teach is reliability. Story 67. Former teacher here. Department leader of special education in a Texas public school claimed compensation for designated required extra work for the department to cover work for non-certified teachers. We did the work. The department leader completed the payment forms to receive compensation that we were never made aware of. We didn't know compensation was even an option. Teachers are so used to being assigned extra work for no extra pay. Because the payment was reported and canceled before the payment hit their bank account, the district treated it as though fraud never took place. They still work at the school and are still department leader. They swore they were going to split the money. Administration had their back and everything because administration had to approve and sign off on the payment. So if the department leader went down, administration would have too. Story 68. I took early retirement due to this one person. New manager. Came in all guns blazing to change things, which was great, except none of the things she changed worked quite as well as the old way. She let whole departments take the same annual leave day with the excuse, you can't deny people their holidays. She would then attempt to cover but would not have a clue. The place went from a fully functional working model, although you can always improve on some things, to a barely surviving workplace with very unhappy staff. From what I've heard since, the company has some money problems as there is nobody chasing bad debts. I think I got out just in time. Oh, and she would always discuss any conflicts as you were walking out of the door at the end of your working day, therefore not giving you a chance to have your say. Quite often, there would also be customers and other staff members listening in. Story 69. Was placed in every department in the company and wasn't good at anything. No motivation to work, and to be a bit honest, might have been a bit slow. No one wanted to work with him and gave him nothing jobs to do. Finally, it came out that we was harassing all the new girls that were being employed, sending them messages and junk pics. Multiple women complained about it. I remember thinking, how the duck is he still here? And then I remembered, he was the owner's son. Story 70. I have a coworker that is not allowed to touch the phones because she's such a Karen to customers. Yet somehow, whenever I work with her, she sneaks to answer the phone. Why? I don't ducking know. But we've gotten at least 5 one-star reviews directly because of her horrible etiquette. And then I get crap for it, like I'm supposed to be babysitting her 24/7. She's 55. I'm 23. The reason she hasn't been fired is because she's the boss's sister. But even then, I find myself asking, how TF they haven't let her go yet. Aside from her bizarre need to be eyed to the people who buy our product, she also sucks at her job, and we are all constantly picking up her slack, and whoever is stuck working with her is stuck doing the work of 2 people for the pay of 1 while she coasts and makes more money than us. Makes me want to scream. Story 71. Fellow housekeeper at a nursing home I used to work at. It was my first job. I could write a literal essay about the things she did that made me wonder why she was still there and reaching her 5-year mark, but I'll stick to the worst offense. She once picked up the leftovers of my lunch in front of me while I was on the phone. Then she proceeded to open it, scoop up a bunch with her fingers, and put it in her mouth, fingers included. I snatched my food back from her, horrified. She laughed and said, "What, you don't like people touching your food?" I walked out and called my manager, who said serious action would be taken Monday. She remained employed the entire time I was there. Heard later she was fired for telling a wheelchair-bound resident he could clean his own damn mess. Story 72. Mechanic. Coworker is incapable of completing a single task. Has been there 2 years and has 40 years of experience. He gets the apprentice to do all his work, gets the good tech to do all his hard work, and sobs to the boss about, "Woe me, I'm an addict and my life is so bad." And my boss is so stubborn and refuses to give up on the guy, despite the fact that he steals, doesn't do his job, smokes in the building, which is illegal, has assaulted other coworkers, and severely damages customers' cars almost weekly. We've had wheels come off because of him, engines totaled because of him. He is the worst adult I've ever worked with. My GF is going through some serious health problems, or else I would have quit a long time ago. This guy wouldn't last a day any other place I've ever worked in my life. Story 73. Another story. I worked in retail, had a manager who was a female around the age of 35, started promising us all raises and new job titles. Me and the other assistant obviously got pretty stoked. Ended up signing contracts for the raises. We had a meeting with the owner and mentioned it to him. He didn't have a clue what we were talking about. Told us it was all complete lies. The raises we were promised weren't coming. We didn't have copies of the contracts, so had nothing to back us up. She quit out of shame about a week later. Story 74. Work in a large national chain. One coworker comes from an ultra-conservative branch of Christianity. I haven't personally caught him yet, but the stories I've heard from coworkers where he is blatantly idiot have me always listening when he enters my department. One coworker told me he heard this dude pleasure himself in the toilets. Can't prove it to management though, because that would be an invasion of his privacy, so my coworker just turned the lights off and left. I look forward to the day we inevitably see this getting walked out of work. No doubt in my mind, he'll say the wrong thing to the wrong person once and get fired. Super ironic given his religious beliefs of love. Story 75. Guy at work. Been there about a year now. Rubs everyone the wrong way. Has no sense of personal space. Needs to be explained numerous times on how to do things. Looks at you with doe eyes. Blank expression. Tell him how to do it. He doesn't. So we end up doing it for him out of frustration of him asking over and over. Some of us go drinking on Fridays after work, and he sometimes tags along. Dude hardly pitches in on the tab, saying he needs to pay this and that. Good thing is, he can't hold his own. Can't run with the big dogs. Almost forgot the best part. On a Monday, after a Friday drinking night, guy jokes to another guy that he was about to grab a female coworker's breast. After I heard that, I go see him and tell him I would have dropped him. Nobody wants him around. Story 76. Worked a summer job at a vendor gardening gig. Despite complaints from our clients, this girl would not get fired. Our clients and my other co-worker once watched her from afar pretending to deadhead plants. She would pick up a plant and mime pulling stuff off it. She would disappear for the entire shift and maybe be seen once, if at all. No idea what she was doing in that time. While I was supposed to train her, and she knew it, she would avoid me, or anyone really, to avoid being trained at all. The one time I actually managed to have a conversation, she was studying some sort of naturopath thing in school and fully believed that people didn't die of things in the past. Like people's sister have any health problems. It was unbelievable. I often wondered if she was a nepotism hire, because it made no sense. Story 77. I used to work at a Jersey Mike's. At first she was fine, had a tougher personality, but she took great pride in her job. Then she would bring her kids to work and let them play in the kitchen while we were working and while we were closing. Not only is that a health hazard, but also there are knives and slicers in that kitchen, and we're talking about son. She straight up told us, if he bothers you, just hit him. I regret not reporting her for CPS. She got fired at one point for leaving in the middle of the shift or something, but turns out she just got transferred, then transferred back to our store about a month later. After I left, she stole like $2K and ran. Story 78. I worked at a water treatment plant. We had one guy who had been there for something like 4 years, but had still not obtained his operator license. He was working night shift, lied about running tests on our water samples, just wrote down numbers and never actually ran the tests, which is a felony, and filled up one of our large clear wells with several feet of unchlorinated water. The next shift came in and discovered what had happened, and all he got was a write-up and still got a good review and a pay raise that year. That incident was the one that made me finally realize I needed a new job. This employee would also disappear from the job without clocking out and without telling anyone where he was going for up to an hour and a half. Story 79. Worked in a kitchen as a porter, did some minor chefing when people were off. Older guy who got hired after me had a bit of a power fantasy, and the head chef made the mistake of telling him jokingly he was the boss of the kitchen porters. Eventually, it wound up just being me and him as porters, because nobody could take his abuse or condescension. Several servers left too. I eventually left after the mental stress sent me to therapy over anxiety and falling into the classic kitchen trouble of substance abuse, alcohol. Last I heard, the dude was employed for another year before being sacked for starting a physical fight with a coworker. Story 80. I work in tech support for an ISP. We have a branch that works overseas, and they're the ones that usually cause problems and seem to have poor training. They're usually not too bad, but there is one in particular that none of us can stand. He doesn't follow any processes or procedures correctly and actively causes problems for customers. Customers constantly complain about him after interacting with him. He makes more work for everyone by screwing things up and then just passing the work on to whoever has to deal with the customer that he pisses off. We have an internal form to give feedback to a coworker's supervisor. One of my coworkers reports him almost every day, and I've personally done it about a dozen times. He's worked here for almost 2 years now. Story 81. One of my former bosses at my first job punched a coworker in the face and fired her in front of customers because she wouldn't stay late on a Sunday, mind you. This coworker already worked 9 hours that day without any breaks. The coworker and her parents successfully sued the company for medical costs. Coworker's nose was broken from the punch, and the company had refused to cover it under workman's compensation because she'd been fired, and additional damages. Charges also were pressed against the boss. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery and was sentenced to probation. Not only was that a whole never fired even after the battery conviction, but last I checked, he is now a regional manager. I strongly suspect nepotism was involved. Story 82. An executive who regularly went to people's homes when he couldn't reach them by phone or email. And I mean when these employees were out sick, on vacation, on maternity leave, even once on Christmas Day. He also once made me call someone, knowing she was in a car on the way to her mother's funeral, and another time went to a guy's hospital room. He was insane and just ignored it. Story 83. I had this duck and 28-year-old dude hit on every new girl we got. The problem was that they were mostly underage. Either way, there were actual complaints of them feeling uncomfortable because of how he would act towards them. These complaints were brought to the attention of management. Management did their investigation, but he was still employed. There's a chance that the girls were afraid to talk, but seriously, almost every single girl on our roster said the same thing to other employees, that he hit on them, making them uncomfortable. He ended up quitting, but the fact that they kinda let it keep going is ducked up. I do know for a fact that some of the girls voiced their concerns for it to still be worrisome. Story 84. I work in a hotel. I have a coworker who constantly asks questions, and when you try to answer those questions, they talk right over you as you're answering, giving them the answer they need to hear, but literally not hearing you. They then proceed to do the dumbest, insane crap, giving guests the wrong information, not adhering to quality standards, outright lying to guests about the conditions of their stay, whatever. And when it all blows up in their face, denying they were the ones who ducked everything up, and blaming everyone around them for giving them the wrong information instead. They're not dumber than a box of rocks. A box of rocks would look like a Nobel Prize winner next to them. Story 85. Haoran, good luck Googling him, it's the #1 boy's name in China, had incredible coding skills, but was quite possibly the dumbest person on earth outside that. He was legit a high-int, low, everything else build. He sold his knowledge of all other subjects in exchange for computer knowledge. He couldn't figure out that labeled drawers contained the thing they were labeled with. He got lost on the way to the UPS store a block away. He was hours late, routinely BC. He was arguing about Chinese politics on Reddit. He deleted the entire purchase history of the department somehow. It's amazing that he randomly just quit and went home instead of being fired/driving right into a river. BC GPS said to Story 86. Mine is both, how the duck did they get hired and why the duck? Are we not firing him? He was our new art director. He lied on his resume, made up all these fake companies he was the art director at. When he turned up, he asked very simple questions which an art director should know. He was clearly not qualified. That raised a bunch of red flags in the department. Finally, he wanted to change all the designs of work that was already signed off by the client because he wasn't satisfied with the outcome. Major clients just left, and the company folded within a year. I fortunately left just before that happened, as I could see this fraudster was going to sink us all. Story 87, my current director. I already knew she was shady and disrespectful, but now it's common knowledge. Earlier this year, she backed into another employee's car. She goes on to say nothing about it until he sees the damage and asks to see the security cameras. They talk and exchange information. The next day, she approached him and said the damage didn't even look that bad. Naturally, he goes and looks at his car and sees that someone has buffed out some of the marks. He asks to see the security cameras again, and there she is, buffing out the marks. Nothing happened, and she's still my boss. The funniest part of this all is that she's the one who signed off on these cameras being installed. Story 88. I work in medical coding. Have a coworker who cheats the system on productivity. It's basically done by how many accounts you comment on. So she basically comments, still waiting for a response on the same accounts every day. And during meetings, we will spend 10 minutes on a subject, work it out, and as soon as we ask for the next thing, she asks how we're doing the thing we just discussed. And the worst part is, even with the cheating on her productivity, she still doesn't meet productivity, like 40–60%. It's worse than the trainee. And we constantly have to fix what work she does. I really don't understand. Story 89. Asphalt paving company. Shop was in the Cleveland city limits. We were in an industrial zone that backed up to residential city park right next door, kids playing basketball. We had a pile for last-minute dumps, asphalt, concrete with rebar, stone, soil. Dummy goes to the trunk of his car, pulls out his R, empties his clip into the pile. Kids take off running. He swaps clips and does it again. A bunch of the other guys are laughing their asses off, and I'm standing there like WTF. He also lit a fire across the street. The fire department had to come put it out. Still had his job. Story 90. At my last job, we had a guy who was so incompetent that someone had to redo 50% of the work that he did. Half his job was setting up installations for window treatments, and every order was wrong and had to be fixed by a coworker or his manager. When he wasn't screwing that up, he was frequently caught sleeping in the chair at his desk, with customers just walking around him. Everyone knew about him sitting and sleeping instead of working. Some of the store managers actually joked about it. I left that job a year and a half ago, and when I stopped by the store this morning, he was still working there. Story 91. Coworker hid the ribeyes under soup bones and then priced it up as soup bones. Got $75 in steaks for like $3. I reported him, and the next day I saw my report crumpled up in the trash can. Story 92. Not a coworker of mine, but an employee of my dad's. He's been trying to fire for the past 10 years, if not longer. It's a huge company, so he has to jump through tons of hoops to get rid of someone and IDK the specifics. Anyway, in 2024, this woman types up an email, prints it, checks it with a red pen, retypes it with the corrections, reprints, rechecks, retypes, etc. over and over. She said she was overwhelmed with hours of work and asked my dad for help. Then when he checked what the hours of work actually was, it was like 5 emails. Story 93. Damn, where do I begin with this guy? He's a boomer on the later side, and I swear IDK how he's made it this far in life. Single, never married, was out an entire month from a skin infection that nearly killed him. Never called in, just didn't show up. Every single day. It was like, I guess he's not coming in today. Until my boss called his emergency contact and suggested he go to the doctor. He finally went. 2 more weeks, not at work. TBH, best 6 weeks of work ever. Useless pause. Story 94. I went to lunch with a dude from work in the late 1980s. He was an Ivy League grad and had a good position for his age. He told me, I hate my job, I hate my boss, and I hate my boss's boss. I'm not gonna do jack anymore. He acted busy and harried at work, always walked around with papers, but he did not do any work. When bosses asked him for updates, he always pushed things out 2 or 3 days. He lasted 14 months before he was confronted and then fired 3 months after that. This guy was a legend for me. Story 95. I have a coworker who was caught pleasure himself in a conference room. He claimed he had an addiction, so they didn't fire him. A couple of months later, during a Q&A at a company-wide meeting, he said, I got a question for you, and then proceeded to rip a blood-curdling fart into the microphone. He's still around, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Story 96. Worked for the second largest wine and spirits distribution company in the US. You can figure out which. This weirdo that someone got hired literally hit on everyone in the office. Even people's wives at holiday parties. Tried playing boss to everyone when he was an enterprise architect. And we went to see the Blue Angels, and he was so drunk by 10 a.m. that he jumped into the water in Ego Alley in Annapolis. Eek, RJ, talking about you, buddy. IDK how? You quit. Worked for UA, then came back after they fired you as a director of literally doing nothing. Story 97. He calls out so often that I literally told a new hire yesterday, it's weird having someone in the department while I do the closing routine. Because our department is tiny, And even when this guy does show up, he spends his entire shift doing the part of the job that has him on our offsite lot, moving things around, or outside the building talking on the phone. He left me alone on a Saturday morning once. Saturdays are our busiest days. I still don't know whether the excuse he gave is legit or not. Story 98. Probably the guy at the gas station I worked at who would complain about management to customers over the fact that they wouldn't promote him to management, despite the fact that he had to be sent home several times with a handwritten reminder to take a goddamn shower. This guy's petulance for being passed over for management was matched only by his beau. This fully grown adult had several customers complain about his stink, so much so our boss had to sit him down and explain to him that he was required to bathe and put on deodorant every day. Story 99. Had someone do something stupid to get hacked and lost 6 figures over a misdirected payment. Same woman 6 months later does the same thing for a large 5-figure payment. Only then, after 6 months go by and the money couldn't be recovered, they said time for them to go. Story 100. I used to work at a retail paint store with this real D-bag. He set off a stink bomb in our store, put a dead rat on the steering wheel of our delivery van, put a dead squirrel under the seat of a neighboring store's van, and drunkenly grabbed the butt of the district manager's wife at the Christmas party. The rat and the squirrel were already dead before he found them. Never got in trouble. Story 101. Hired a friend of the TOU to be a field engineer, gets in a fight with a customer, and we lose the customer. He gets promoted to product management. We have a different customer meeting, and he tells customer they are idiots for how they want to use our product. We lose another customer. He gets promoted to director of QA. Another company hires him away to become CTO, and they go out of business. Story 102. I work in a dispensary. My coworker has berated me and my other coworkers in front of customers, to our faces, to other members of management. Once he told a customer they should buy me when he asked for something cheap. He also was known to have picked up substances off the store floor a customer had dropped and take it home. Not to mention he was stealing vape carts. But he's their best employee and is always on time. And there's no proof on the cameras. This dude needs to be fired. Story 103. Spends hours a day on his phone and readily admits this. Has repeatedly broken rules on harassment and substances. Had admitted to stealing from the company countless times. Breaks equipment nearly daily. Drinks on the job. Yet after 14 years, that individual still works at said company in Vermont. Story 104. We fired a guy because we tried him in every position in the store, and he couldn't do even one of them properly after multiple training attempts. I was brought in as a witness to him being let go, and I remember my boss telling him the job wasn't rocket science, and he couldn't even do the damn dishes right. I haven't worked with anyone that incompetent since then. Last I heard, the dude got fired from quite a few more places for the same reasons and got into substances. Kinda sad. Story 105. Moved teams recently, and there's a guy in the team who just appears to do nothing. It's like a secret everyone knows, and I've exchanged a bunch of how and why is he here comments with others. He sits on video calls with his camera off and never says anything unless asked a direct question. And then his answer is always vague and generic. Whenever he's given work, he seems to find a way to work with someone else, and we just know they're doing all the work. It's pretty weird, really.